listeners, and welcome to The Floor, fantasy and lore from the ground up. My name's Eli.
I'm Joe Bondowski.
And I'm Aaron.
We do in-depth lore podcasts for games, movies, TV shows, and different worlds of mythology in our culture.
One of us does an in-depth research on our topic. One of us is familiar with the topic.
And one of us knows nothing. So the right questions will always be asked and will be addressed for anyone coming into the topic, regardless of how much you know.
We are going to be starting our series on Dune, D-U-N-E. So you may have seen the trailers for the movie that's going to be coming out this December. We had planned this project for last year, but when they moved the movie, we decided to move the episode. So we're going to be starting here in June, and then hopefully we'll cover everything we really want to cover to get you ready for the movie. Because the first time I saw the movie Dune, because there was a version made in the 80s, I was really confused by a lot of things going into it. I was like, why is that? That seems silly to me, and a lot of things. But since then, I have gone and read the books. So
real quick,
we will
Joe,
say that this movie is based on a book that was published in 1965. So it is a book that has been around for a long time, and it has had a lot of influence on sci-fi and inspired a lot of people who went into it.
Real quick, before we dive into that, we do have RJ again with us today, and I wanted to introduce him. And just like, if you guys didn't check out our Hollow Earth episode that dropped right before this one, go check it out. RJ is here from Mancy again. He loves Dune, and he's going to kind of be here and help out with the intro to Dune. RJ, take it away. I think you had something.
Well, as a writer myself, as somebody who does narrative design for pop culture and writes sci-fi and does this whole writer thing, Dune has to be one of the most influential pieces of science fiction ever created. And a lot of people might say, oh, Star Wars is the most influential. Star Wars owes itself to Dune. Literally, George Lucas was inspired by Dune.
Yeah, he read Dune and was like, I'm going to make a sci-fi opera.
Star Trek 2, inspired by Dune. The Chronicles of Riddick. Futurama. Hayao Miyazaki's film Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind.
Oh, yeah.
Inspired by...
We should do the Valley of the Wind at some point. That's a great one.
It is.
Also, one of my favorite book series of all times, the Kingkiller Chronicles, The Name of the Wind, is my favorite...
Say that one again?
The Name of the Wind is the first book, but the series is called The Kingkiller Chronicles.
Oh, I love those books. Yeah. The Wise Man Fear. Oh, awesome.
Yeah, Patrick Rothfuss specifically cites Dune as an inspiration. Dune really, it made science fiction, in the 60s. Science fiction was for, dweebs that didn't know anything about literature. It was for, penny novels, dime store novels. It was treated
fiction.
Like how parents treat video games today.
Or how they treated D&D in the 90s.
Exactly. But when Dune came out, people were like, "Oh, you a writer."
So smart people words. I understand.
You're a writer. And
it's
also
very
fun
heavy,
fact,
very dense work.
The famous quote, the litany against fear: "I will not fear. Fear is the mind killer. I will face my fear. I will let it pass through me." That whole the litany against death is what it's called, or the litany against fear, is the exact amount of time it takes for you to wash your hands.
I've seen that one. That's a good one.
Through the whole pandemic, I would just recite the litany against fear.
And where did that come from?
My hands.
Dune. That's from Dune.
Oh, that is okay. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, Dune is very heavy, and this phrase comes up very early in the first book, but it's very heavy on this idea that fear is the major villain, and approaching fear and how to treat it and how to work through it. It's very heavy in this idea, and I think that's part of the reasons why it was so powerful to people. Is I've used the litany of fear in my own personal life during times of trouble, because it is beautiful.
Well,
I will
but
let
I mean,
fear pass through me. Like,
yeah.
Dune is
Herbert.
taught, like, in college campuses, like college level writing courses to this day, study Dune. The only book that I think might have been, like, the only series that might have been as influential as Dune is maybe The Lord of the Rings. Maybe.
I have a
I
question.
think that's a hard maybe, but okay.
Lord of the Rings was more influential to the mainstream. So, like, flashy-wise, I think it was bigger, and you can correct me if I was wrong, but Dune seemed to, like, change society. Lord of the Rings was more just mainstream society. But, Eli, question for you. Would you say that Dune to, like, sci-fi is similar to Do Robots Dream of
Robots Dream of Electric Sheep?
Electric Sheep. I was close. Or
Do androids dream of electric sheep? Blade Runner?
Androids, yeah. Is it close to that, or what was the other one? Necromancy. Is it close to that in like that?
Neuromancer.
Neuromancer.
Yeah. So we talked about those like being the beginning entities for stuff like Blade Runner or post-apocalyptic worlds and cyberpunk and all that, and those were huge. Is Dune kind of like that, but for sci-fi, but on a bigger scale? It sounds.
I definitely put it in its own realm. And it's coming out around this same time. And I would say the two epic, big, so Neuromancer's like, we're touching space a little bit. It's very little cyberpunky.
Yep.
And these ones, they've gone interstellar. Huge, and Foundation is another one. So Dune and Foundation are two where like the human civilization stories that were just huge and epic and just are encompassing, not intergalactic, interstellar future. And those kind of take up kind of what we were seeing in when we were talking about Warhammer.
Oh yes.
Kind of along those lines. Now each of them are definitely their own what they are. Foundation, it's more of a prophecy story. Dune, it does have that noir kind of feeling, but it's also like an epic, and it's we're talking Star Wars. Was very inspired by, and Star Wars is a space opera, and
well, and you also have to argue that it was a huge influence on Terminator. Right, and we will talk about how that is. Like, Terminator is essentially like a selection from the history of Dune, and it changes society. Right.
Wait, Joe, wasn't Star Wars a space opera, but it's basically ants or something? You said.
Oh, that Star Wars is about bees,
or something like that. Yeah.
And like if you like impose like the world of Star Wars with as though they're all bees and hive, like it makes even more sense. Be like, oh wow, they really are bees.
Well, yeah, no, we were talking about that. I don't know if we even talked about it on that podcast.
But with Dune, so Dune pioneered what is called soft science fiction. So there's like soft science fiction and hard science fiction, kind of like a soft magic system or a hard magic system.
Or high and low magic system.
Yeah. So Dune like took these strides in soft science fiction rather than, focusing on like the technology of the far future. In the future, we will all be robots and we will eat nutritional paste. Instead of focusing on like the hard aspects of technology, the physics, astronomy, chemistry, Dune doesn't take the time to like explain all of that.
It's
a force field. Don't ask me how. It's a force field.
Yeah, it's a force field. Don't ask questions.
Just from the perspective of someone who knows nothing here, and you can tell me what part of this is wrong. So is this more like, okay, so we are now X amount of years into the future. Mankind has met aliens or whatever, and they have expanded. Mankind has not met aliens. Okay, so it's just mankind, and they have expanded over hundreds of or thousands of planets even.
Even then,
is that 1,300 or 1,600?
Like, it's not super explained because it's not important to the story.
Yeah.
No, there's a definitive number.
So no, but it's more just like what, like perspective-wise, this is like something that's in the future, and there's planets, and they live on different planets.
It's a long time ago galaxy far away.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's fine. It's just I'm just trying to get a perspective of kind of what this world looks like.
Yeah,
I don't need hard truths.
I'm going to walk you a little bit through some key points of history in Dune to get you from where we are to where we will be.
Okay.
All right. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
So
Frank Herbert is the author of Dune, and the whole project starts out of the fact that he was a journalist. He was writing for magazines and newspapers, and he got an assignment to write about sand dunes in Oregon, and it just fascinated him, and he just dug in super deep, and like after finishing it, he had this ton of extra material, and that was kind of where Dune starts for Herbert, is just studying these sand dunes and being fascinated with them. So he begins work on the novel in 1959, and he doesn't actually publish it until 1965. And during this time, his wife actually supported him while he was working on this book. And Dune is not a huge success, but as a sci-fi novel, it is fairly successful. And then he writes the second book in the series, which is Dune Messiah. And again, it's not a flop, but it's not a huge success. And then when he writes Children of Dune, the third book, that is when it takes off. Big. And essentially what had happened is, over the years, it was building this fan base. And so when the third book dropped, that fan base was big enough to launch the third book into a huge seller. And then everybody else heard about it and was able to go back and start the series.
So it basically snowballed. So Dune Messiah, when did that come out?
So Dune Messiah was in 69, so 4 years later, and Children of Dune isn't until 1976.
And that's kind of the marker. Mid-70s is when sci-fi was getting cool, and a lot of the other books started to take off as well, and that's where all these sci-fi stories start really taking off.
So, and then there's a few things happening, at least during Herbert's life and in the United States specifically, that kind of really popularized Dune, because Herbert takes a look at a lot of ideas surrounding genetic engineering, surrounding religion's role in politics and everyday life, and just a lot of ideas that people were very interested in understanding the U.S. versus the Soviet as the Cold War is brewing. And even like you talk about the litany of the fear, right? Herbert lived through World War II and is very familiar with the famous speech by Roosevelt where he says there is nothing to fear but fear itself, right? And this is the banner of the United States throughout the Second World War, where Herbert is in his youth and experiencing this. So the next thing I want to talk about is how Herbert decides to explore religion in society. Because understanding this and the people called the Bene Gesserit is a big part of understanding the Dune world. So Karl Marx, in his Communist Manifesto, he says this phrase that many people are familiar with, right? That religion is the opiate of the masses. And as he goes on to kind of explain in his book there, he talks about how he believes that religion was created by the wealthy and the influential, or the elite of society, as a way to control the masses, right? To maintain the status quo and their position on top. And so Herbert really takes this idea and wants to explore it. Instead of saying maybe that was done, in his world of Dune, it is very deliberately done. The Bene Gesserit have very specifically crafted a religion. They very specifically... Okay.
Bene Gesserit.
Bene Gesserit. That's the religion in Dune that you need to know about. The Bene Gesserit. Yes.
And these are the people who are using spice, correct?
They do use spice. And I don't.
Is that code or?
We'll get to spice in a minute, but it's a big part of the Dune economy.
Bene Gesserit is the religion. Can you tell me? And this may be impossible, but in 20 seconds or less, kind of just basically what that religion entails.
So, well, like I said, the Bene Gesserit is a constructed religion by the elite, and the Bene Gesserit are among them. They craft very specific mythologies about messiahs that they spread on the worlds that have humanity on them, so that if they need to call on those people, they can send someone down to fulfill the prophecies they've presented about a messiah, and then they will follow that messiah. These are specifically crafted mythologies driven by thousands of years of propaganda, right?
Wow.
And they will send down people, even like, and if the people don't like the Bene Gesserit, like if there's an anti-Bene Gesserit people, they will send down people who claim to have left the order and rebel, and will start with building, like agreeing with these people until they can lead them, and then they can start weaving in these mythologies again. So the mythologies, mythologies of the Bene Gesserit are written by writers who are paid to write them. And then they are sent to specific planets, and if one isn't working, they'll send another, right? Until they have that mythology embedded in the people, and they can use it whenever they need to control them. Like I said, Karl Marx said it. Frank Herbert said, how would that really look? How would you really do that? And that is what the Bene Gesserit do, and that is the religion you will encounter on Dune. And very much so the Dune political system is a feudal system. There is an emperor, you have dukes and barons and everything like that.
Back up. Is there one emperor per planet, or is there just one emperor?
There's one emperor, the God Emperor.
So, I should say, at the time we encounter the story of Dune, there is one emperor.
Okay, so the reason you say that is stuff happens, basically. So we were just talking about the religion, the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah, well, like I said, I was really confused by the Bene Gesserit the first time I saw the movie.
Are you talking about the 2000 sci-fi?
No, so I didn't even finish that. So I saw the movie from the 80s. That was my first
David Lynch one.
Dune.
Okay.
And then I saw part of that sci-fi one, but it just didn't pull me in as much. And by then I'd read the book and had a much bigger appreciation for it.
Yeah, Dune has so much, and in order to fit so much and suspend our disbelief in the style of writing Dune, Herbert drew influences from techniques used in actual mythologies, epics, the epics of Homer, the Poetic Edda, Beowulf, because those mythologies told a lot in a little. They knew how to tell a lot in a little and constrain themselves enough to basically develop this style of storytelling. And by adapting that, Herbert not only weaves in the story of this religion, he also shows it, as we say in writing, show, don't tell. He shows it through the way in which he is writing it, which is just fabulous. So juicy. It's the juicy stuff I like.
Juicy stuff. Okay. All right. I like juicy.
So I did want to touch on the government just a little bit because, like I said, it's this feudal system kind of built on how most governments were functioning during the Middle Ages. And if we look at Catholicism, right, all throughout Europe, you had these kings and queens, and standing next to all of them was a cardinal or a bishop who was the advisor from the church. And you will see that exact thing play out in Dune, right? We have the emperor, and they have their Bene Gesserit advisor, and we have the duke. And for him, he doesn't have a Bene Gesserit advisor because he's got a Bene Gesserit wife, And so, in every position of political power, there is a member of the Bene Gesserit there to watch what they're doing and to advise them.
A mixture of church and state.
And to, basically be a spy, right?
Yeah, a combination of spy and advisor rolled into one. Yeah.
And advisor is more do it our way so you don't get murdered accidentally in your sleep.
The Bene Gesserit aren't quite like that. So we'll go into, we're not done with the Bene Gesserit because they're a really complicated topic. So the other thing the Bene Gesserits do is they do genetic engineering. So again, this was really big because we had just had World War II with the Nazis, engaging in partly eugenics, trying to wipe out the Jews, but they were also engaging in their own genetic engineering with, officers and generals from the Nazis impregnating hundreds of women to try and create super babies, right? So we have that
babies.
Yeah,
everybody wants one.
But you don't know what inspired Captain America? You should have seen Aaron's face when he heard the phrase.
Yeah, super babies. Let's back up for a second. When we say super babies, there's Captain America super babies. There's the Spartans from super babies. There's a lot of different types of super babies. Can you please enlighten us on what they decided was
going to be a super baby? Okay. So the Bene Gesserit have been engineering these babies for thousands of years. And so we did mention briefly the spice, and we'll probably have to do a whole episode on the spice to really cover it. But it has two really important properties. One, it extends and doubles human life. So once you start taking it, your life expectancy doubles. And 2, it gives you the ability to see into the future a little bit.
Some precognition.
A little bit of precognition. And so what the Bene Gesserit are trying to genetically engineer is someone who can take the spice and see far into the future. That is the genetic trait they are working on. Someone who can take this drug and just see thousands of years ahead of what is coming.
Rather than just tomorrow.
Yeah, rather than just tomorrow or the next, few minutes. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so that is what they are genetically.
So they're not so much like, they're super babies, but they're like superly imbued to like harness this spice drug better than others.
Yes.
So they're like fed skooma daily when they're children. Spice. Excuse me. So I hope you all got that joke.
Well, and there
what's skooma?
That's from Skyrim. That's their cocaine.
Yeah.
It's like underwritten lore.
It's from the Druids, actually. So the Druids had skooma, which was then adopted by Alex Huxley in his book Brave New World, and then was picked up by Skyrim.
Soma. Oh, okay.
Skooma. I guess Soma.
Well, they put a K in it, but it's really Soma, right?
Oh, all right. Yeah.
Well,
I just played
in Skyrim they call it skooma, but
I just played Skyrim
clearly...
because you made me play it, Joseph. I played it because you were playing it.
But yeah, and so there seems to be a difference in how men and women react to this ability to see into the future, because the Bene Gesserit in their genetic engineering are very specific about when a male can be born into this genetic engineering chain. Because when the male is born, it seems that he will have the strongest power. And so they have chosen like a very specific generation. And so, minor spoilers, this is the very beginning of Dune, and something I didn't even understand what was happening is the protagonist of the first book and what will be the movie is Paul Atreides. And his mother was told by the Bene Gesserit, only bear daughters. We are not ready for the person who can see far into the future. And then it will be your grandson who will be what they call the Kwisatz Haderach.
Oh yes, obviously the Kwisatz Haderach.
So, but that's to be that super being that they've been genetically engineering for years. But Jessica doesn't follow her orders, and she bears a son, which is Paul.
Okay, back up for a second. Doesn't follow her orders, so she purposely has
yes.
a male.
So
I knew it. I knew women could choose the gender of the child. My mom lied to me.
So yeah. So that is understanding the Bene Gesserit, their role and position, and kind of how that played into society, and was such a big thing in the 60s because Marx had said this, and in the United States religion was very big, whereas the Soviets had tried to follow Marx's teaching. And here Herbert kind of explored this middle ground and is like, what if we still have religion, but it is, as Marx said, deliberate in controlling the masses.
Okay, I have a few questions.
I'll let you answer your question, ask your questions, Aaron. But I do want to backtrack to when you say parents can choose the gender of their child, because they can, and I will explain it.
Yes, please.
All right.
Do that one first, because I want to ask a few questions.
So, in vitro fertilization was pioneered around the 80s, early 90s. I was actually one of the trial babies.
Whoa.
No way!
To have them see if they could determine accurately the gender of a child. And they could, with I think it was like 65, 68% accuracy, predetermining children with in vitro fertilization. And then it was deemed unethical and not allowed because of books like Dune, making people afraid of like this weird science eugenics that can come from that.
I mean, to be honest, if the Bene Gesserits has that kind of power, like to choose genders, I would be worried, just because if someone like that evil and that intent on being in control of other people's lives had that much control, that would be scary to me. But again, outside of that, I don't think it's a big deal.
So, RJ, you say they made it illegal. Was this during the Satanic Panic?
I don't know if it was. It was kind of at the same time as the Satanic Panic. I think it was more like the 2000s.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Where they were like, okay, this genetic modification stuff is getting a little bit out of hand. And then recently, I think it was only like 2015, they made it illegal to copyright genetic code, like somebody's genetic code.
Oh,
which was like
interesting.
a big deal.
Yeah.
Aaron, you had a question about the Satanic Panic?
Yes, we just casually threw Satanic Panic out there like everybody knows it. Eli, explain
this is a massive tangent for Dune. The Satanic Panic happened in the early 80s. It may even started in the late 70s. We're not going to go into full details. Essentially, it started with a psychologist and a patient who completely fabricated a story. It became a bestseller, and all across America, parents were terrified their children were being abducted and led into Satanism. That's all I'm going to say because it's
let's move on to Dune.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's enough. Okay, I have questions about Dune just because I know nothing and I want to just get this clear. So I know that a lot of like futuristic, post-apocalyptic stories that were written around 70s, 80s tend to like have steampunk theme to some degree. What is the world like in Dune as far as technology?
Okay, God, that is a big question. You don't even understand. So,
no. So I need you to answer it as lightly as you can because I want to do specific episodes on that if it's that big.
Okay, so this is the understanding Dune is about understanding the Butlerian Jihad. So their technology is like ours. It just keeps advancing and advancing, and computers get faster and smarter, and they depend more and more on them. And eventually we get Terminator, right? Eventually the machines turn on humanity, and we get the Terminator fight. They call it the Butlerian Jihad. And so there is a war.
Butlerian Jihad.
Yeah, the Butlerian Jihad, because they're like butlers. They do your bidding and your work, right? And then the butlers turned on us. And so then there's a huge war between the machines and mankind wins. And at that point, thinking machines is how they refer to them, but I guess computers is what we would call them, right? Are not
AI.
allowed.
It's
AI.
I think the direct quote is it's a sin to create something in the model of a man's mind or man's thinking.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have the Butlerian Jihad, and all the machines are killed off, and then it is illegal to create or have a thinking machine. And so at that
But they say sin because it's the church telling people what to do.
It is the church.
Of course it is.
And let us not forget Final Fantasy X's inspiration from Dune, making technology basically a sin and manifesting that sin to create the antagonist of the game.
I had not made that connection. Wow.
Dune has influenced like so much stuff.
I'm glad we brought RJ on for this because just like you guys didn't do your research. I'm just kidding.
I like literally there are like upper level college courses on Dune. So like don't feel bad if you miss something.
But yeah, so we have the Butlerian Jihad, and now they can no longer. Now mankind has spread the galaxy. We are on, spread the universe, I should say. We are in multiple galaxies, thousands and thousands of worlds, and we can no longer have machines do a lot of the thinking that we needed to do, like space travel, right? And so it becomes important that one, they begin to do a kind of genetic engineering to replace the things thinking machines could do. And two, they begin to use a combination of advanced training and drugs to induce human beings who can do things that humans could not do before, but we need because we no longer have the machines. So you will encounter.
Hey,
okay.
You're making a connection in my brain. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but so AI used to be able to fold space for humanity, and that's how we are able to be interstellar.
Yes.
The machines turned against them, and so they had to use the spice to fold space to continue to have a interstellar empire.
So this is an intermediate question. I will answer it.
This is the intro, Eli.
Sorry.
We're getting there.
So you have the Holtzman effect, right? Holtzman is considered a thinking machine. He was a man, and he was in an accident. His brain was transferred into a machine, and he creates the three principles or idea, right? The first Holtzman idea that he presents allows for instant communication across the universe. The second is the shields you'll see in Dune, and the third is the ability to fold space. But
those are the three main texts that were.
Yeah. And so once the third Holtzman effect is discovered, They can fold space and they can travel the universe. Now, we were already spreading the universe, but these were long journeys of years. Now we could go instantly. Now these civilizations on the planets are no longer isolated. And this is where we go from multiple emperors in various empires across the galaxy to one, because now they can be one. And there's a big war that happens because of this. And so then we get the Butlerian Jihad, and Holtzman, along with all the other thinking machines, are killed. And now folding space is very dangerous because we don't have the machines to do thinking for us. And they're losing between 2 and 3 ships out of every 8 whenever they try to fold space. So it becomes very dangerous. And we kind of go into this dark age of everybody's just on their own now. And then we discover a drug called the Spice, where you can see into the future a little bit, and that can help you adjust your mathematical calculations.
Question.
And now we can travel the universe again.
Can we, our next episode, because we're running short on time here, can our next episode be specifically about the Spice and just kind of how it was implemented? Because it sounds like I don't think everybody on each planet found the Spice at the same time. So it probably became a very rare commodity and was traded and became implemented and stuff like that.
It is a rare commodity that comes from one planet. Planet often referred to as Dune, but the planet is Arasa. No, I almost said,
this is the intro of almost every Dune movie, because it's like the intro of the book, right?
Yeah.
The spice melange is essential to all commerce and travel in the universe, and it is only found on one planet, Arrakis, commonly known as Dune.
And it's worm poop.
And it's worm poop. I love that so much.
If you want to support us, you can hit up the Patreon, which is patreon.com/Floor Fantasy and Lore. And then, of course, there is our Facebook page, which is Floor Fantasy and Lore. And always, Floor is spelled F-L-O-R-E. That's Lore with an F in the beginning. If you want to check us out on YouTube, maybe see some gameplay footage or just some images to go along with some of the things we talk about, like some of the creatures or the environments, then you can see those on YouTube, and usually just The Floor or Floor can find it there as well. If you are interested in joining the Patreon, you can get early access and ad-free access to the episodes there. So you can get a week early to some of the shows, and we are in discussion about some of the other things we want to expand to. And thanks for listening.
And now we have given you the floor and foundation. Now go build your own story.